Hi, this is Jeff Majewski of the IBM Corporation, Webster Application Server version 8 development. And in this demo, we're going to be looking at applying maintenance with Installation Manager on one system and then moving it to a remote system to apply maintenance again. So on our first system, our maintenance system, we go ahead and mount the Installation Manager install kit and User LPP Installation Manager. We define a file system for IM, and in this case we're defining just a single one. We're putting everything at /installation manager. So we create one file system of 2,500 cylinders to contain the binaries, the app data, and the shared resources. And then once we've created that single file system, we go ahead and do an install of IBM Installation Manager to create the read-write IM. So as you can see, we're going to be running this in group mode, so we run group inst C. Our binaries are going to be at /installation manager /bin. The runtime data is going to be at /installation manager /app data. And this means that we can just remove that one file system somewhere else rather than having to move three separate file systems. So we run that, it takes a minute or two. And when that's complete, we go out and look at the contents of Installation Manager. And we see app data and bin as we expect. So now we're going to go ahead and install a copy of WAS, Webster Application Server v8 for ZOS. First we create a file system for it, and we're going to mount it at Service User LPP Z WebSphere, which will become important later on. Then we run the install command. We make sure, since we're in group mode, that we have the right user ID. We check the offering that we're installing. And notice that the install command is running from Installation Manager bin rather than opt IBM Installation Manager as in the previous default. We check the shared resources directory, the repository. And while we're doing that, it's always a good practice to make sure that the repository is mounted on the system where you're using IM before you go ahead and invoke Installation Manager. So there's the Installation Manager repository for WAS v8 is there. So we'll check our install job one more time and submit it. Everything seems in order. And this runs about 12 or 13 minutes. And when it's done, we have a complete copy of WAS v8. And if we look in the IM directory, we see in addition to app data and bin that the shared resources directory has been set up as we directed in the install command. So now we're going to go ahead and dump those two file systems, the one at /installation manager with the IM data, and the one at Service User LPP Z WebSphere with a copy of WAS v8. And we're going to copy those over to a second system, as you might do if, for example, you were rolling out a copy of WAS to be used across your data center. And now we go to our second system, IMGWK. We're going to retrieve the dump that we made of IM with FTP. And since this is in DFDSS format, we have to give the right DCB characteristics. And again, this copy is the IM runtime data, the copy of the IM binaries, a copy of its list of installed programs. and then the location for the shared data and cache. When that's done, we simply need to go out and restore the contents of that dump file. And then once it's restored, we mount it at the same location on the second system that it was mounted on the original, and of course it has to be read-write. So now we have effectively cloned the installation manager. Then back on our original system, we're going to dump now SBBO HFS, the copy of WASV8. And of course, if you had several copies of WASV8 or other products, you would either dump each one of them or put them all in a common file system and move them together. But the important thing is that you're moving a copy of IM and its installed products that are consistent with one another. So from my W case, my second system, we retrieve the dump of WASV8 the same way. Again, we restore the dump file, and then we'll be ready to proceed. Obviously, if you automate this process, if you're rolling out multiple copies of this across your data center, you'll see some savings in the amount of time that it takes to get the job done. So when we mount the copy of WASV8, we have to mount it at the exact same location that we did on the original system, service user LPPZ WebSphere, so that IM knows where to look and knows that this is actually the same copy of the product. Now that we've restored both of those file systems, we'll go out and take a look at what's in the first one. And we see one problem here, and that's that the user ID and group that own this on the original system don't exist here, which is why they show up as numeric in the ls command. We verify IMadmin doesn't exist, and so we pull up a copy of the job to create it with the same UID and GID values as our original system, so we don't need to mess with those values in the file system. We create the group and the user ID with the same privileges, and go ahead and give a password to the user. And now we can log in as that user ID and actually run the installation manager. Again, we're on our remote system, a different z/OS system entirely from the original one where we did this setup. We don't need to rerun the install of IM here. In fact, we don't want to because we want the same data that we had before. So if we go out to the Eclipse Tools directory in Install Manager bin, we can tell tell the Installation Manager command line tool to list the packages or products that are installed. Since we're in group mode, we have to be under that same owning user ID for one connected to the same group. And we see that Installation Manager is installed and also WASV8. And WASV8 is installed at Service User LPPZ WebSphere. Now we'd like to show that we can actually do something here, but rather than install an entirely new product, we'd like to go ahead and manipulate the copy of WAS that's already there. So we're going to add the samples optional feature. And we do that by issuing the install command and adding comma samples after the offering name. We have to specify the repository where the WASV8 samples can be found. And so far in this command, we haven't indicated which copy of WASV8 is to be manipulated, because there may be several. And so we tell IM specifically that the copy of WASV8 that we want to work with is the one in Service User LPPZ WebSphere, V8R0. If we'd given it some other directory name, then IM would have tried to do a clean install of WASV8 plus the samples from scratch. So we let that run for a minute or two. And then we can look out in the User LPPZ WebSphere and see what we've done. And we see that samples have been successfully installed on our remote system using IM.